Ronald, thank you for joining us again. The second topic I wanted to discuss with you today, affecting a lot of our buyers and clients, is a vacant homes tax.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that the city of Toronto just implemented. So, first question: how much is the tax?
So the tax is 1% of the current value assessment of the property. So basically, every property every year on your property tax bill will have a listed value based on what the property taxes are being assessed on. It will change every year with an MCAP assessment, but it's basically 1% of the listed value.
Okay,
there.
1%. Okay. What is the definition of vacant to the city of Toronto?
So they don't specify a concrete definition of what vacant means, but they do have a number of categories that where a property is not vacant. Okay, so of these categories, you can occupy the property as a principal residence. If it's your principal residence, you do not necessarily have to stay in the principal residence for over 6 months in each year. For example, there are a lot of Florida snowbirds where they may fly and live in a different country for more than 6 months a year, for a warmer climate, something like that. If that is the case, the vacant home tax may not necessarily be applicable to them.
Okay.
You can occupy the property with a permitted occupant, so someone who is not necessarily a tenant, a family member or a friend, that kind of thing. It can be occupied as a tenanted property, so leased out to a paying tenant. It can be vacant with certain exemptions, where even though the property is vacant, the tax may not be applicable. These exemptions are quite narrow. We can go over them a little bit. And then basically anything that is not in these categories would be considered vacant or deemed vacant by the city of Toronto.
Okay. Can you give us a couple, maybe one or two examples of exemptions that you would most commonly see in the city of Toronto then?
Yeah, so the exemptions for if a property is kind of vacant, but for the tax not to be applicable, it would be things like, for example, if the registered owner has passed away in the past year and the property is vacant as a result. For each of these exemptions, there needs to be supporting documentation on hand, so it's very important that documentation is readily available in the event that there is an issue with the city of Toronto. Another exemption would be if there's repairs or renovations ongoing with the property and the property is vacant as a result. For that, they're quite stringent on the requirements. They want to have a description of the project, they want to have copies of all of the issued building permits, that kind of thing. And they may even, if they audit, they may even look into, for example, is it a valid reason for this property to be vacant?
Okay.
Like how far along have these renovations progressed, that kind of thing. Another exemption would be if the principal resident is in care. So for example, like if they've been admitted to a healthcare facility, that sort of thing. Again, they want documentation there. If the property has been transferred within the last year, then that could be one way to not have the tax levied. For certain people, they may require the property for a certain period of time, but not necessarily meet the 6-month requirement,
right,
if for full-time employment purposes. So for this, they would need to be able to show like proof of employment, letter from employer, that kind of thing, which shows that why they would need to be in the city or in a certain location for a certain period of time, but not necessarily 6 months. And in very narrow cases, there can be a court order ordering the property to be vacant.
To be vacant, okay.
And in those situations, then the vacant home tax would not apply.
Not apply. Okay, as long as you have supporting documentation.
Yeah, the supporting documentation is very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how would the city know if the property is vacant or not? Like, I'm sure they don't have people going around knocking on doors looking at it, right? So how would they?
So basically how it works right now is annually you have to file it. Every Toronto residential property owner has to file a declaration online saying whether the property is vacant or not. Generally speaking, that is going to be the end of it. The city of Toronto has the right to audit on a random basis or on a certain specific criteria basis any homeowner who makes the filing of a declaration to see if they have the supporting documentation. So if they choose to audit, that's when the supporting documentation would be required. So depending on what category you're declaring occupancy on, it would be things like, bank statements, utility bills, insurance, home insurance bills, your driver's license to say if you're living in the property. If the property is tenanted, then it would be things like a residential lease agreement, okay, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, under the other exemptions, a lot more of documentation.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Ronald. We've been working together for a long time, and you've been helping a lot of our agents. Maybe can you give us a couple seconds about your law firm and what kind of services you guys provide?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm the principal lawyer of Ronald Trac Law. We're a law firm that primarily specializes in real estate law and corporate and commercial law. So we do things all ranging from purchases and sales of residential and commercial property, mortgage refinancing, lease agreements, that kind of thing. On the corporate and commercial side, we do anything ranging from contract drafting, purchases and sales of businesses, other types of agreements, incorporations, shareholder agreements, so on and so forth.
Perfect.
Our offices are currently located in North York, but we primarily operate remotely during this time. So especially for clients who may not be as mobile or prefer signing documentation virtually, we would be great for that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to leave your description in the comments section there. So if anyone has any questions or requires services, they'll reach out to you. You're very responsive all the time. So with all my questions, I ask you 100 questions every day almost, but you get back to me very quickly. So thank you so much for all of that.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Isaac, for having me. Thank you, everyone.